Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava Metzia, page 15a, part 2, with the words Gufa Amar Shmuel. The Gemara returns to discuss Shmuel's statement itself that was mentioned above. Shmuel says a creditor collects the value of the enhancement of the land. Bava says, know that this is true, as this is the standard formulation that the seller writes to the buyer in the deed of sale. I will stand in silence and purify and cleanse this sale, meaning I accept responsibility if the land is repossessed by my creditor. The text of the document continues. This applies to this property itself and the labor invested in it and its enhancement, and I will present its value before you. The witnesses then sign the document and attest, and this seller consented and accepted upon himself all the commitments enumerated in the document. Evidently, a creditor can collect the value of the enhancement. Rav Chia bar Avin said to Rava, if that is so, in the case of a gift, where the owner does not write this formulation to the recipient of the deed of gift, would you indeed say that the creditor does not repossess the value of the enhancement of the land from the recipient of the gift? Rava said to him, indeed. Rav Chia bar Avin said to Rava, but is the legal power of a gift stronger than that of a sale? As in the case of a sale, the buyer loses the value of the enhancement if the land is repossessed. Rava said to him, yes, it is indeed stronger, since in the case of repossession, the recipient of the gift does not receive the value of the enhancement back from the one who gave the gift. He is under no obligation to relinquish this value to the creditor. Rav Nachman said, this following Braita supports the opinion of Mar Shmuel, but our colleague Rav Huna interprets it as referring to other matters, so it does not support Shmuel's opinion, as it is taught in Braita with regard to a case of one who sells a field to another and is appropriated from the buyer's possession, as it was liened to the seller's debt. When the buyer then collects compensation from the seller, he collects the principal from the lien property and he collects the enhancement from unsold property. Evidently, the value of the enhancement is also repossessed by the creditor, but our colleague Rav Huna interprets it as referring to other matters, meaning to the case of one who buys a field. I wonder why it says Rav Huna our friend, Rav Huna our colleague. I wonder how many times it says that. There's maybe some hidden meaning there. Huna Chavrin. Huna, our friend, interprets it as referring to other matters. In the case of one who buys a field from a robber, in that case, the robbery victim is certainly entitled to the value of the enhancement of the land. It is taught in another item. In a case of one who sells a field to another, and the buyer enhances it, and then the creditor comes and repossesses the field. In this case, when the buyer collects compensation, the halacha is as follows. If the value of the enhancement of the field is greater than the buyer's expenses in generating that enhancement, he takes the difference in value between the enhancement and the expenses from the owner of the land, being the seller, and he is compensated for the expenses by the creditor. And if the expenses were greater than the enhancement of the field, he receives compensation for his expenses only up to the value of the enhancement from the creditor. The Gemara asks, but how does Shmuel interpret the Braita if it is referring to one who buys a field from a robber? The first clause of the Braita poses a difficulty to Shmuel's opinion, as Shmuel says that one who buys a field from a robber does not have the right to compensation for the enhancement of the field, and the Braita states that the buyer is entitled to compensation for the enhancement. If it is referring to a creditor, then both the first clause and the latter clause of the Braita pose a difficulty to Shmuel's opinion, as Shmuel says that a creditor collects the enhancement of the field and needs to pay nothing. The Gemara suggests two answers. If you wish, say that the Braita is referring to one who buys a field from a robber in a case where the robber owns land with which he can compensate the buyer instead of paying him money. In that case, the compensation does not appear to be interest. Alternatively, it is referring to a case where the buyer performed an act of acquisition at the time he purchased the land from the robber's possession, thereby formalizing a condition that should the field be appropriated from him, he'll be reimbursed for any enhancement in its value. Since the buyer acquired the enhancement at the time he paid for the field, it does not appear as if he is receiving interest. If you wish, say instead that it is referring to creditor, but nevertheless it is not difficult according to the opinion of Shmuel. Here in the Braita, the reference is to enhancement of the field. And there, so enhancement is not reached on the shoulders. Okay. We'll continue on 15b.